All right, everybody, thank you for tuning in. And today we have a special guest, a new old guest on the podcast. So Borge Fagerli makes a special return. He has been on this podcast a lot and on my YouTube channel a lot. And then he kind of went missing and he kind of went on different paths. So we want to discover that and a few other cool topics. So Borge, hey, how are you doing?
Hi, you pronounced my name really great, by the way. I think it's the first, it's the best pronunciation I've ever heard from an international podcaster. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you. Actually, maybe you can do a public service announcement and just, can you say your name like how you would actually say it in Norway?
Borge Fagerli.
Okay, so it's basically the same as mine, just like the vowels are a little bit briefer.
Exactly. Yeah. So most people just say Borg, and then that reminds me of the old Star Trek evil Borg race, and I'm completely fine with that.
Yeah, Borg. I mean, it's still better than some of the like Borge Fagerli and somewhat
Fagerli and Fagerli. That's the worst pronunciation of my last name.
Fagerli. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Borge, so what's going on with you these days? That's a very broad question, but what are you doing? What are you passionate about? What are you engaged with? Just in general life, like people know you as the fitness guy, the nutrition guy who writes and talks about biorhythms and myoreps and maybe you're still doing that just in Norwegian and not in English anymore. So, yeah, can you just give a brief update first?
Brief update. In 2019, January, I started working full-time as a product manager for the company I founded in 2006, My Revolution, a supplier of sports nutrition and health supplements. So I've been working on that for a while and had to scale back on my coaching and my international presence. Then during 2020, we basically, had some internal issues in My Revolution, or maybe not issues, but we just sort of, it came to the surface that we had different visions for the company. I had more of a, I wanted to, save the world kind of thing. My Revolution to me means something grander than just selling supplements. And the others kind of wanted to focus on just running a business. And, I completely respect that. And I just realized that this was something I had to do for myself and maybe not through a business. So I had a thriving podcast at the time for My Revolution, and I had started to work more one-on-one with clients and just decided to go all in on that. So nowadays it's all in on one-on-one coaching, and with a Norwegian focus. I just have like one international client now. I also just started my own Norwegian podcast, so things are looking good. As for the coaching part, I've sort of integrated what I did before, like the understanding of nutrition and training, but and continuing on with a sustainable perspective on it. I'm not chasing, I'm not working with fitness competitors or bodybuilders. I'm working with more average people that just want to maximize their return of investment, basically. I'm working with more high-end professionals, ambitious, driven people that perhaps are standing in the way of their own happiness from just the way they think about themselves and think about their own business and think about health and nutrition in general. It's, once you have a certain perspective, it tends to generalize to all aspects of your life. So it's, I tend to work with people now for a minimum of 3 months and do weekly 1 hour discussions, conversations. I just like to connect with people, and it's improved the results of my clients, and it's improved my happiness and enjoyment of the whole process by 10 times at least. So these days it's I keep evolving and learning new things and basically being more and more holistic in my perspective and being better, I think, of figuring out what each client needs to get the best results and the best mental perspective.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so it's good to hear that you're back doing coaching again. And this is something that I wanted to touch on because I know that at one point over the course of us working together and just observing the way you were talking about things and your general attitude towards the whole fitness industry, I definitely noticed that it was almost, or maybe not even almost, it was basically a process of burnout, just getting fed up with the whole pursuit of the six-pack, the single-digit body fat, the huge biceps, that you just found yourself burnt out on that. So I want to tie it back to what you mentioned about who you're working with now, because it's great that you found now a clientele that you're happy working with. But can you talk a little bit about that, how you got to that point of just not being happy with what you were doing before?
Well, in my mind, it seemed like chasing those type of goals, and I'm not trying to say that this is the case for everyone, but chasing those goals can end up being a destructive mission. It just it goes into the extreme, more volume, more frequency, just do more, eat less. Or on the other hand, if you want to gain, you should just go mad, do the extreme bulk. So it just seemed like, and obviously it can be colored by trends in the industry and trends from the people that we hung out with and talked with and the most popular podcasts and experts. And this was sort of the message that was being conveyed. And my type of perspective on the whole thing, having been in this for way over 20 years, was that this is just a pendulum. The pendulum keeps swinging in each and every direction. And this is not the answer to all problems out there. And I tended to believe that it was more of a mental capacity. It was more of the perspective you have on the whole thing. And I saw this when we worked with the Sustainable Self-Development program also, that some of these guys and girls that tried the program, to them it was a huge relief that they could get such amazing results from spending less time in the gym and having a more overarching principle-based thinking around the process and learning how to figure out their own key to progress and just relaxing, taking a more long-term perspective on it. And as you all also know, that this was sort of drowned out by all of the guys, like the experts and authorities with millions of followers that were preaching a different perspective on the whole thing. So I just kind of lost my whole passion in the whole thing, that maybe I didn't market myself good enough, or I take full responsibility for not getting my message out there. But it's like banging your head against the wall sometimes, and I was tired of everyone that wanted to have me show them a study reference every time I opened my mouth, basically. So I just felt like taking a big step back and watching the whole thing unfold. And fortunately, it seemed to be, at least in some areas, to be more balanced now. And like all voices are being heard, and some people have burned themselves out doing the more extreme, or maybe not burn themselves out, but maybe not having those fantastic results that they were almost promised from looking at 8 to 12 week studies. So I think it seems like the whole thing has mellowed out a little. Of course, some are still arguing. Now it seems to be whether failure is actually failure, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, but it's just full circle, and it keeps going back to the same things over and over. I guess if you want to be in this industry, you need to have a strong opinion about something, and I don't have any strong opinions. I agree that you can do high volume and get great results, but my question is, do you actually need to? And after 10 years of training, will you actually have more muscle than the guy who just chose a more moderate volume? And I don't think so. But if it makes you feel good, then go ahead. In the short term, I must say that I've also followed you and what you've been doing, and I completely respect the hell out of that, what you've been doing high volume and dieting down to a crazy shredded condition. That's very very impressive what you managed to do. So I'm all for that, if it's for the learning experience and if it's for figuring out what you enjoy doing and not what you're supposed to be doing because it's optimal.
Yeah. Just on that, so I don't do high volumes anymore, and I'm not chasing the shredded physique anymore. Oddly enough, now that we are no longer doing the SSD thing together, my approach actually resembles that a lot more these days.
Mine too.
Yeah, and I almost feel like, we talked about this in private, but maybe some people, because I still get questions like, hey, what happened with you and Borge? Why is he no longer on the channel? And I always kind of mention them that, well, he kind of went on different ways. Some of the internal motivations that you just outlined here, but I almost feel like we started collaborating on all of those things at the wrong time, because I had an internal kind of inkling towards the same things that you're outlining here, but I was still sort of at the more, not beginner stages of my training journey, but I was still at that stage where that internal fire and impulsiveness was still there to chase those really short-term impressive results, or just see how much I can push myself. And while it's there in you, I think it always remains to be just an itch that you feel like you need to scratch. And sure. I think you had the edge over me in that you've been in this whole thing at that time for like 20 plus years, or I don't know. And you have gone through all of that. You've done bodybuilding shows, you have done the high volume, the low volume, and there were no kind of uncovered mysteries for you at that point. So you were comfortable, like truly comfortable, taking that more relaxed approach. Whereas for me at the time, it was like, I fully buy into everything that we're talking about, but what if?
Yeah, sure. What if?
Yeah. And that led me to, for one, trying higher volumes myself, and also doing some foolish things which I would never do today. For example, when I was dieting down, I was doing way more volume than I could recover from. I couldn't sleep anymore. I was doing everything that we talked about for months not to do. I did all of those things for a period. And of course, that also bled into the content that I just wanted to put out on YouTube, how much volume and
you made some great content out of your experiences, so I believe it was necessary.
Yeah, it was a part of the journey. It's just something that I had to go through. It's unfortunately, you cannot graduate to or spread words of wisdom before you actually truly acquired that wisdom through your own struggles and failures, and I just had to go through that, unfortunately.
And I think that also you can talk about these things, but if you've never done them, then you will not be confident. You will have that mindset that the grass is greener. I completely understand that you need to have that experience for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And now, 2 years later, like gone through a lot of things, getting shredded completely just burning myself out on all kinds of ridiculous things, the lack of sleep for months, experiencing how it is to truly do things the unsustainable way and pushing yourself to the limits that way. And now I'm like, okay, so this is why we were talking about all of those things, to avoid this, because what came after that was miserable. But anyway, so you found yourself in that place where you just felt burnt out, kind of talking about these things, and you found this whole chasing of results with methods that are just not sustainable. Was there ever a time when you felt really internally conflicted about this? Like you felt like you had to talk about certain things, and even though you weren't feeling passionate about it, or you felt that internal conflict as you were doing it?
Oh yeah, all the time, and I keep having it. So it's not like it's completely gone. I tend to call it humility, that I always question my own beliefs, but it also has a flavor of maybe lacking 100% self-confidence in my knowledge or my understanding, and I have, instead of letting that drag me down, the way I used to. It's more of a driving factor to me now. It's why I keep reading nutrition books, I keep reading training literature and studies, and I keep following, having my finger on the pulse. But I don't really get so much emotional involvement in it anymore. I focus on the people I work with and how I can help them. And I also see the same thing. Many of the clients that contact me and want my help, they're not the guys that need more training. They have done the high volume stuff, they've done the high frequency stuff, and so a lot of them is simply rehabbing from that mindset themselves. And it's a combination of, if you're a young college student and, before Corona, then, life was probably pretty good and you were eating well and you were, hopefully sleeping better than the average working class guy. And you can get away with that. You can get away with a high volume. And let's face it, you're way younger than me. So if you were my age, you would probably break after a couple of months on doing the stuff you were doing. So it's all contextual, but I think when it becomes a general recommendation for everyone without contextualizing it, that's when it becomes destructive. And but I see the same thing with the professionals I'm working with, that they have this sort of mindset when it comes to their own business and their own passion for what they're doing in their lives, that they tend to burn out doing that too, because it's all consuming. It takes up so much time that they don't get to spend time with their family, and it comes to a point where they're thinking, is it all worth it? Because they're making more money and they're having more success, but are they really? It becomes an existential question. So I have a metaphor that I've started using. I'm a big fan of using metaphors because I think we tend to listen more when you tell stories. And not tell someone what to do, and it feels like I've been spending many of my years training like I'm in a rowing boat, rowing really hard and spending a lot of energy and having to look over my shoulder all the time and having to use one side more than the other sometimes to course correct. And now instead I'm sitting more in a sailboat and I'm adjusting my course with just small movements of the rudder to steer according to the way the wind blows, instead of having to fight with every inch of my strength and willpower to achieve something. And it's more of an observer role and trying to basically to navigate the best way I can through life, and I do see that it in all endeavors, whether it's business, money, love, you need to be authentic. You need to have some quiet time where you just try to listen internally what's going on and what feels right to you. Trying things, being willing to make mistakes, The classic story about Bell, that he tried 100 times. He failed 100 times to make a light bulb, or was it 1,000 times? I can't remember. And his perspective was that, he figured out 1,000 ways to not make a light bulb. So we shouldn't be afraid of failure either, but use it as a learning experience. So these days, I still have my emotional roller coasters, but my whole perspective has shifted, and it's all just traveling on a sailboat and being able to watch to enjoy the journey instead of constantly using muscle and force to make things happen.
Yeah, and it's also pretty incredible that one of my big fears when I started talking about the more sustainable approach, and when we were talking about it together, I always had this big fear of, man, like, are there enough people who are there for that kind of message? Because, and this is again kind of a just a proximity bias, or maybe just you get into this echo chamber, seeing certain things around you, and it makes you think that these are the only ways to do things. It kind of reminds me of when I was looking for a university degree, and when you don't have a good idea of what's possible out there in the world, like, I thought that the only jobs available were like, you're either a mechanic, a teacher, or like a carpenter, and like there's like nothing else. And then it's like, oh wow, there are like thousands of different jobs available. And similarly to this, it seems like, okay, you're either a bodybuilding coach, or you're like a weight loss coach, maybe like helping very obese people become not obese, or maybe you're helping hard gainers, and that's it, But the reality is, I was kind of amazed just lately in the past couple of months, like, so many of the people who reached out to me for coaching, like a lot of them were basically the perfect clientele of what you're describing. It's people who tried a lot of different things, had families, they were not like hardcore bodybuilders. They just wanted to get a good physique and maintain it, and getting it and maintaining it in a sustainable way, which is, I never thought that there would be even like 10 people who would need that. And there's a lot more. So it's pretty incredible that when you become authentic about a certain message, you will find the right people for that. So,
that's just exactly my experience as well. Everyone is talking about niching it down, and of course, the guys we are following, we're probably following them because that's the sort of content we have been exposed to. And if you look at it from like a larger perspective, from a global perspective, that's only a few percentages. But on a global scale, that's still many millions of people following that ultra extreme, hardcore everything. And people are still watching Mr. Olympia and buying the muscle mags. So there's a huge audience for that. But compared to the general audience that think bodybuilding is just crazy, silly shit, it's just a blip on the radar. So the majority of people out there are just the regular guys and girls who want to look great in the mirror and be happy about life and learn how to navigate their own reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey guys, just a brief interruption. I want to let you know that round 2 of my group coaching service has now opened up. In this coaching system, you will get a customized training and diet setup tailored for your needs, detailed guidance on training progression and diet management, and you will be able to interact with me and other members of the group, both in written format and on calls during the week. And for a limited time now, you can hop on a call with me and we can talk over your goals and see if you are a good fit for this. So if this sounds interesting to you, then check the link in the video or show description below and you can book a call with me. But if you would rather just send an email, you can also do that. Also check out the show description for that. All right, that's it. Let's continue with the show. So this is what you're doing now, and it's good to hear that you're having a good experience with that. So another thing I wanted to kind of talk about with you, if you're comfortable discussing this, is there was a nutrition slash training online conference where both you and I gave a talk, and I don't know. I think you also gave a talk on training. Maybe you were talking about myoreps, but I could be wrong. But then you gave a nutrition talk, and you talked about your experiences with TRT and also just like hormonal assistance and having been around that yourself, and then stopping with it lately. So yeah, I don't know how much detail you're comfortable talking about this, but can you share something about it that you're comfortable sharing?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm very comfortable sharing. That's kind of the thing with being authentic, that you need to have the courage to open yourself up. And before I used to be afraid of that. Would people judge me? And now I just embrace judgment instead. I think it's a more trustworthy way to communicate. But basically,
how were they judging you? Just out of curiosity.
Well, at least in Norway, it's very stigmatized if you're using steroids. Back then, when I used it, it was legal. It was legal to use it. But in certain fields, then you were still being looked at as an idiot or just a roid monster without any brains. I had people telling me, wow, I'm surprised, you're very intelligent, just because I had big biceps.
Right.
This was back in my younger days, but my history was that I was very skinny as a kid, and I realize now that it started with hypothyroidism. I had all the classical signs of low metabolism, and it wasn't discovered back then. No one was aware of it, and it led to it was interacting with low hormone levels. So my testosterone levels were really low, and I had higher estrogen production as well. I was aromatizing the little testosterone I had into estrogen. I also had to have surgery to remove gynecomastia, just because that's, having low testosterone and high estrogen was, and also having a lot of cancer in my family. So I needed to get that removed. And so I had low testosterone levels. It was hard for me to gain muscle. I trained my ass off and had some pretty good results. But compared to some of my friends, I was just, way back there. And then a friend of mine got access to testosterone. It was Omnadren back then. And we were really, really hardcore back then, and we used one per week. So it's like 250 milligrams per week.
Oh, okay.
And so for me, that was just replacing what I was already supposed to have normally. Normal production is between 70 and 100 milligrams per day. And back when I was maintaining on TRT and regularly testing my hormones, I needed to use 150 milligrams per week just to have high normal testosterone levels. So I was probably metabolizing it or using it differently than others. But what I discovered was that I could suddenly build muscle. My libido was back. My brain fog lifted. Everything just, my self-confidence, everything just fell into place. I felt like this was the way life was supposed to be. So you can call it a psychological addiction, but it was. If Norway had been as open to this as the US, then I would be getting hormone replacement and feeling normal at least. So I used some testosterone back then, and we also had access to some Dianabol. So I think we used like 4 of those, which is very little compared to today's dosages. But I ate like a horse and gained strength like crazy. And so I went off and everything crashed, of course. I couldn't get back to normal. I was just, losing my muscle. So yeah, for sure it became both a physiological and psychological dependence, or I felt like I really needed it to function. And then I, at the age of 26 or 27, I think, I worked in New York as an engineer, developing 3G phones back then. This was in 99, I think. 99, yeah, 25 years old. And I got some doctor prescribed testosterone. And when I came back to Norway, I could, for the first few months, use that prescription to get the same thing in Norway. And I just kept using it. I had a few periods of time where I couldn't get it prescribed by the doctor, or I couldn't get access to it, and got my hormones tested, and they were always really, really low. The normal range is 8 to 35, and I would test around 4 to 6. And for many years, and of course I did some cycles along the way, competed in bodybuilding, where it's almost a necessity if you want to be competitive. I never did any well. I tended to get injured. My connective tissue health was really sucky, and maybe my body just wasn't born to do this naturally. So,
can you share something like when you say you did some cycles? So like I know just in talking to you that you like never push the envelope, not nearly as hard as like some people do, but like how outrageous did it get, or like what else did you try when you did cycling?
Well, testosterone was always a mainstay, and I went up into 750 and 1,000 milligrams per week, but that made me feel really bad, so I always had to scale it back. I did try some trenbolone, and that was really strong and made me really, really strong, but also very aggressive, so I just figured out I couldn't use that at all. I reacted really negatively to that. And well, a few other things, but I would, for short periods of time, I was part of that whole 2 on, 2 off kind of thing, or 2 on, 4 off, where you just use for 2 weeks and take 2 to 4 weeks off. So I experimented with that and wrote a lot of articles on that for a while back then. So, I never did anything crazy. I can't really, off the top of my head, remember what it was. But the one thing I can remember is that when I tried using more, I would always either injure myself or feel really bad. So I guess my body just didn't tolerate it. So I had to scale it back and go back to maintenance dosing. So for me, a perfect dose would be 150 to 250 milligrams per week. I remember staying on 250 milligrams per week for at least 2 or 3 years, and managed to maintain like 100 between 100 and 105 kilo in good condition at a height of 186 centimeters, 6'1", and compared to others, I was tiny, but to me that was, I had added 30 kilos of muscle since I started training, so it was still a lot for me. So eventually I tried for almost 2 years with the help of an endocrinologist to regain my endogenous testosterone production. I tried triptorelin, I tried Clomid, Nolvadex, HCG, all the tools in the box, and I got up to 6, testosterone of 6. So my doctor just told me, well, it seems like this is a permanent shutdown. There's nothing you can do, and I advise you to go back on. At that time, we had access to testosterone gel, so I could just twice a day put some gel on my body, and without the injections. And I was happy on that for a while. The positive thing about that was my girlfriend became pregnant at the end of that. So my son now is 3.5 years old. So that's 4.5 years ago since I went back on testosterone. But I always had that in the back of my mind. If my body was able to produce enough, hormones and testosterone, and at least there was some production there, it wasn't completely dead, and I was able to impregnate my girlfriend, then, maybe if I did it the right way, because I was still training hard, I was still doing frequency, I was training almost every day at the time. I was going through the carnivore diet thing. I was, going on diets. 10 months out of every year, I was dieting. Again, due to my low metabolism, my hypothyroidism. So I figured, well, let's just, figure out what's more important to life, being big and muscular or being healthy. And when I became a dad, I realized I want to become healthy. I want to live long. I want to watch my son grow up. I want to be a good role model. I want to be a good father. So I stopped using testosterone, and the story I told on the wasn't it the Muscle MBA, I think?
Yeah.
Had some presentations. I used a whole, toolbox of supplements. I realized now in retrospect that it was not necessary, but, I just wanted to go all in. So I used vitamin A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, the whole alphabet of vitamins and minerals, and just ate. So I gained probably 5 or 6 kilos in a very short span of time, just because I kept eating every 3 hours. After 6 weeks, I had 8. My testosterone levels was actually 2 points higher than they have been for the last 25 years. So that was, a big, I was jumping up and down from happiness. I was so happy, I was screaming from the rooftops with barely normal levels. But, it gave me hope. And my FSH and LH levels were normal. So there was some things going on there. And after 3 months, when I retested, I think it was up to 12. And now for the last 2 years or so, I've been maintaining, well, it's been 1.5, almost 2 years. I've been maintaining around 15. And I feel pretty good on that. I'm, way less muscular. I'm holding around 92 to 94 kilos, depending on how much food I eat. Reasonably lean, maybe 12%. But I feel good. I have I keep working on my metabolism, because every time I'm tempted to even reduce my calories, it drops like a rock. My body temperature, and I get cold hands and feet and brain fog. So I'm very, very sensitive to dieting, and just have to keep maintaining a good food intake and not going overboard on my training.
Right. Yeah, I just plugged in. So I'm assuming you're referring to nanomoles per liter when you say 15. So that should be like 433 nanograms per deciliter, which is right around like the kind of middle of the normal range.
Yeah, and that's the crazy part about the normal range, because if the lower end is 8 in nanomoles, and the upper end is 35. That's like 4 times as much. So you can be normal at 8, and you can be normal at 4 times as much testosterone.
Yeah.
And I'm basically, well below the middle of the range, but, still, in an optimal world, I would have even more, but maybe it will never happen for me. Maybe that's just the way my genetics dictates that, I'm supposed to be mediocre.
So one thing that you mentioned in there, which I think made a lot of people kind of raise their heads, and definitely I'm interested in this because I also am thinking about it, like maybe when I'm getting a little bit older, or maybe not even older, like maybe even in the somewhat close future. Just to have a little bit more sex drive. I've never been one of these like, oh my God, I want to hump everything around me. My libido is so high, even as a younger guy. And when I'm like that,
same here. Never.
Yeah. We had some discussions about this on the podcast recently, that every once in a while it happens, but it's almost like a fluke. Like something just happens. I don't know. does it have to do with the weather, something in the air? I ate something, I don't know. But when I'm like that, it's kind of fun. I feel like a real man,
Yeah.
So I'm also thinking
It's
about
when
it.
Venus is in Gemini and full moon is up, then,
Yeah, maybe. Who knows?
Astrology, that's the way to predict it.
Yeah, who knows? But I also thought about it, like, maybe just like a little bit of assistance, just to make myself a little bit more alpha, and certainly when I'm older, to I don't just now being at the age that I am, the prospect of now I'm fit and lean and muscular, and as I'm getting older, it's all downhill. It just doesn't sound that appealing. But you mentioned that you had to kind of weigh the benefits of being bigger and more muscular and being healthy. And now, do you think that you were unhealthy being on TRT? And if so, in what way?
I think in my case, it was unhealthy because I was using it as an excuse for not taking care of myself. So I do believe you can be healthy and be on TRT, especially if there's something wrong with the signaling inside your body. And, is it the lifestyle? Is it the genes? Is it the environment? What's causing it? I at least wanted to try to see if I could fix it myself. It's because this is my expertise. It's like walk the walk and talk the talk kind of thing. I was suffering hard from imposter syndrome, advising all of these people on how to take care of themselves, and then I was obviously not doing that myself. But I do believe that for some people, if no matter what they do and they have tried it all and they still have suboptimal testosterone level, it should be a human right to get hormonal replacement therapy. And that will improve their health, as long as it's obviously supported by taking care of yourself with your overall lifestyle and nutrition and training perspective.
Yeah, it's what you're saying is actually very interesting, because that's something that we discuss quite a lot on this podcast with a couple of regular guests. That there's nothing that would make me trust someone who is enhanced as an expert less than someone who is not enhanced. Like in your case, I knew that you were on TRT, and I never questioned what you had to say about anything related to training or nutrition, because I always had the feeling that I never got the sense that your experience is colored by the fact that you're on testosterone. But in a lot of cases, just with some of the language that people use and the way they are talking about things, I cannot help but feel that they forgot how it's like to be not enhanced. It's like a lot of things, like, for hard gainers, 1,000 calorie surplus, yeah, it's too much, but for some people, that's exactly what they need to gain muscle. And I'm like, really? For like 1,000 calorie surplus? Like, really? Yeah. So a lot of these things, or whatever, like it's only a matter of the failure of the mind, and that's why you didn't put on as much muscle as this other guy that you see on Instagram. Like it's all about the work ethic, and it's like really, yeah. Like, so I think that's the only problematic thing.
That was like the narrative back in the days when we used to read the muscle mags, that all these bodybuilders are so big, because steroids was never discussed back then. It's because they're training so hard, Yeah. That's because they're elite. They have the mindset. They have everything. And I've been traveling a lot, and I spent like 3 or 4 years in the States. I got to meet with and I got to train with some of these big guys, and they didn't train harder than me. They didn't do anything differently. Some of them were just, like 3 out of 4 sets were just, considered warm-ups for some people. They didn't push themselves at all. Once in a while they would push to failure, but, and this is the discussion that, if you look at how all of the Mr. Olympias have trained, and Dorian Yates always comes to mind. The HIT crowd will use him as a perfect example of the one set to failure, but he didn't train all that different to many other guys. He had that one set to failure, but he had 2 to 3 warm-up sets that were very similar to how some other elite bodybuilders would be training. But yeah, it's like an illusionist on stage. If you look at what I'm doing over here, you won't see what I'm doing over there, and that seems to be the case in a lot of the inauthentic industry, where well, it's this or it's that, it's the volume, it's the intensity, it's the whatever horse you're riding, and it's they point a single finger at that one thing, or it's the sugar, it's the gluten if you're in the diet world, or it's the plants, or it's the meat if you're a carnivore or a vegan, and where's the voice of reason in all of this? Where's the more well, let's look at the whole thing in a grander perspective throughout the years, and you will find some similarities in what's been working for a long time for a lot of people, and it's not the extreme approaches at all. It's the more moderate. But now we live in a world where moderate is boring and it doesn't sell, and people don't want to listen to that message. I'm a member of, I'm fortunate, I guess, because I'm a member of a Facebook group called Abbreviated Training. And it was started by a guy that used to be a very voice of reason, or a very, he used to stick his head out all the time in our group.
Yeah, I remember.
And I think he left it because, we kept getting into arguments. And I see now that we were more in agreement on things than in disagreement. But anyway, it's a big Facebook group, and it's thriving, and it's a lot of normal guys, and a lot of these guys are really big, really muscular, really lean. They're looking awesome, and they're training 2, maybe 3 times per week with 1 to 3 sets. And that's the environment I'm exposed to now. And like I keep saying, for every guy that's been using the extreme approaches, the higher volumes, the higher frequencies, I can find you at least one guy that's looking just as good with the lower volumes and lower frequencies. So I think you just need to, what's your cup of tea? At least get points of reference. What we did with the SSD system, we had people start with high reps, end up at low reps. Now in retrospect, I think we pushed the envelope too hard on the effort part, like using MyoReps in cluster training. Many people couldn't recover from that when they were doing full body workouts 3 or 4 times per week, obviously. At least now I can see, obviously. So over the long haul, I think a more moderate approach where you at least have some leeway to try more frequency, more effort, more weight, more volume, whatever. It's a much better way to enjoy the training journey.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said. The problem is that all of these things go in both directions. So yes, for every guy who got great results on high volume, for one, you can find a person who got just as good results on low volume, but you can also find a guy for every person who got amazing results on low volume, you will also find a guy who got really shit results on low volume. And that's why I'm reluctant to, for example, to name any kind of training system now, something like abbreviated training or something, because the thing is, it really just all depends. People respond better to different things. Most of my clients, I can tell that I'm training them with fairly moderate volumes, often no more than 12 sets a week. And most of them say, wow, this is actually working way better than anything I've done before with much higher volumes. But there are a handful of individuals where 16 plus sets, it's perfectly appropriate given your situation. So it's, and that again is kind of an unsexy message because it just really depends on the person.
I think you shouldn't lock yourself into one way of, try to figure out what works on an individual basis. And I do believe that if what you're doing now isn't working, then try something else. It's not that the variety in and of itself it's what's working, but if you're not really challenging anything. So say, for instance, you start with low volume. I think that's a good starting point. And you're happy with your progress, then, well, keep doing that until things stagnate. And if they stagnate, when and if they do, then you at least have some room to try more volume, incrementally try, one or two more sets here and there. That's the process I take my clients through. We start with a more conservative volume and teach them how to use effort. I have clients that have been doing 30 sets per week for some muscle groups. And they freak out when I have them do like 4 to 6 sets per week. But after only a few weeks, they have recovered. They are getting stronger. They are, I only have 4 sets or 3 sets for this exercise, so I might as well push myself.
Yeah.
And so they get a different experience, and they keep, gaining on that for a while. And then when things slow down, let's try to add more volume. But we don't go back to 30 sets per week. We go from 6 sets to maybe 8 sets per week. So at least try to look at it from like a journey, like you're in that sailboat navigating, you course correcting according to what you see, not jumping from one extreme to the other. And that's, I think, for some, a volume increase will be the ticket to more gains. But the more salutary and religious you get to what you're doing now, the less aware you are of how your body is adapting and the adaptation process and the seasons and everything. I remember there was a study recently. I just can't remember the reference, and I really wish I can find it again. There's been like a trend for some training studies where one leg is doing low volume and the other leg is doing high volume, or at least different protocols. And then they see that, the individual gains are 40 times higher than whether you manipulate training variables. So a high responder will always gain better whether they're doing low or high volume. There will be some that, one set is giving 0 gains and 3 or 5 sets is giving, at least some gains. But the individual results between high or low volume isn't that amazing compared to the between individuals results. And there was one study that actually looked at they followed a given training protocol for, I think it was 2 or 3 months, and categorized people into high or low responder. After a 2 to 3 month break, I just can't remember the details, so you just have to apologize. They came back and repeated the training protocol, and expected that the high responder would keep being a high responder. And it was just no correlation at all. Like you would have people that for the first training period was a low responder, and now suddenly they were a high responder, and vice versa. So like a body keep adapting throughout, from month to month and season to season. You have people that are very sensitive to sunlight and darkness, like the circadian rhythm research is showing. You have some people that, suddenly they put some effort into their training. Again, the body keeps changing, the environment keeps changing, what you're eating, how you're sleeping, the stress level. There are so many factors involved that if you're just blindly following the high or low volume crowd, then you are missing out on all of the other pieces of the puzzle. So that's the message I want to convey. Try to expand your perspective and look at other variables, and just make sure that if you want to do higher volume, we'll at least have all of your other ducks lined up in a row so that you can at least recover from it and gain from it.
Yeah, that's very well said. One more question, just on what we talked about previously. So if you could go back in time, so you mentioned that coming off TRT, what happened with your body composition? So you said that you're still at a decent body fat level. Did you experience a big regression in muscle mass?
Oh yeah, for the first 6 weeks, I basically had 0 testosterone. I also scaled back my training because I didn't want to overdo anything. So I did lose some muscle mass and started gaining some body fat. It wasn't like from day to day change, but definitely, over 6 weeks, there were some changes going on. So you could say that I have lost probably around 8 kilos of muscle mass since then. But you also have to keep in mind that I have had periods of time with very little training. And these days, since my connective tissue health has never been any good, I keep having some pains and aches here and there. So I need to to be very conservative in the gym still. But what I did, what was comforting, going back to what we talked about earlier, that should you trust someone on TRT, I have gotten even stronger confirmation on that my beliefs about training will work. They will work even better when you're hormonally assisted, but when you're natural, they are even more important to at least get any gains.
Yeah.
So for me now, I have tried doing periods of higher volumes and higher frequencies, and I get a much stronger and more rapid negative feedback that, I can gain for maybe a week or two, but then things just, it's a hard stop. I just can't coax it the way I could before on hormone replacement therapy.
Right. It's still crazy that like you were only on like 150 milligrams and like the difference is still that big. Like it's crazy. I don't because it's hard to even explain, because probably your test levels were not like 1200 or something. Probably only like whatever 600 to 800. I would expect on that dose.
Yeah, I measured them regularly. I had the blood work every 3 months, and I was around 22 to 25, and a couple of times I managed to get 30, but it was still within the normal range, high end of normal range. But yeah. And keep in mind that my individual genetics probably had like a really poor response to it. I probably need that strong of a signal to even have that level of muscle mass. I know guys that have went off hormone replacement therapy and they maybe lost 3-4 kilos. Mm-hmm. So I'm probably just one that, since I was skinny growing up, it made such a big difference once I started using, and I had to use, some people could get my levels at 1 pack of Testogel per day. I had to use twice as much to get the same level. So I probably don't metabolize testosterone very well.
Right. Yeah. So just for the listeners, that's like 600 to 800, the range that Borge mentioned on TRT. So very interesting, man. All right, sir. So I know you have to run, but the outlining your perspective on things was very insightful. So thank you for that. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And it was good to just catch up generally.
Likewise.
Yeah. So
you're doing some awesome stuff, Abel. I mean, I'm following you on both Facebook and Instagram, and the content you're producing now is just top notch, and I hope everyone listening to this really appreciates that. You're doing some great work. You're a voice of reason in all of this.
Oh, thank you, sir. That's coming from you. That's a big honor. Please mention where people can find you. I just saw that you started a new podcast, which is great. And not for me, because probably I don't understand it because it's in Norwegian. It's the podcast on my Facebook page, obviously. I do post in Norwegian now, and I will start posting on Instagram in Norwegian, but there's fortunately a translate function, so you can at least understand some of it. And I still have my international followers liking my post and commenting on it, so the translate function does seem to work appreciably well, but that's basically it. Facebook and my podcast. I don't really push content a lot. I have a busy schedule working one-on-one with clients now, which is where I'm thriving. So awesome. All right, Borge, thank you so much again for being on, and I hope to catch up with you in the future again.
Yeah, definitely.